It's day 10 of 10 Days with Catherine Howard. Today we're going to think about the sort of trial, investigations, her execution and her legacy. So potentially quite a long video. I'm going to try and condense it. Don't forget, there's a quiz, free quiz over on my Patreon if you want to test your Catherine Howard knowledge. Left Catherine yesterday on the 2nd of November 1541, where the king has been told that she has had these pre-marital affairs. So this isn't necessarily just about Thomas Culpeper, this is about Derham and Manox too. So initially, Catherine denies everything. But then eventually, on the 8th of November, she says that Manox, pursued her and that she was a young girl, that Derham actively pursued her and that he'd pursued her aggressively, and that she denied that they were married, which Cranmer was a bit sceptical of, because don't forget, back then in canon law, you've only got to sort of make a promise to each other that you will be married and consummate it. And if those two things have happened, then you are married. So it kind of hangs on this promise. And in some instances, they would insist that that promise was witnessed. Both Catherine and Derham denied that their relationship continued once she was queen, and Derham was actually tortured. So it very much seems that it didn't continue. We didn't think it did anyway, because we know she went off him a little bit before then. Now, what Derham does say is that Culpeper had replaced him in her affections, and this must have been quite a surprise, because I think Catherine felt they were, being quite secretive here. But by the 11th of November, Catherine has admitted to the meetings with Culpeper, but blamed him as being like the aggressor in this relationship. So while Culpeper does admit to meeting the Queen, he doesn't admit to anything really physical going on, although he does say his intentions were kind of in that direction, but he didn't, achieve it. They don't seem to have questioned Catherine as to why she was meeting with him. So we still don't really know if there was this attraction there, or if she was trying to buy his silence. Supposedly, when these findings were announced to the king on the 12th of November, he was incredibly distressed. He seemed to have genuinely been very affectionate towards Catherine and to have, been quite taken with her. But, she wasn't really given long enough to fall out of favour either, was she? So who knows? Maybe he was genuinely upset, but she was still quite a new possession for him. On the 14th of November 1541, Catherine was moved to a monastery, or maybe former monastery at Sion, and 8 days later she stripped of her queenship. On the 1st of December, Culpeper and Derham were found guilty of treason. 8 days later, Culpeper was beheaded, and he was given like a public execution rather than a more private one that may have, not that he was of a hugely high rank, but he seems to have been particularly singled out to have a more public one than private, to make a bit of an example of him. So Culpeper was beheaded, whereas Derham faced the full treason penalty of hanging, drawing and quartering. Various members of Catherine's kind of former household were accused of sort of being involved in this, including the Lady Norfolk, who was trying to sort of find this evidence that Derham had locked in a chest. They all threw themselves at the king's mercy and were eventually pardoned. This was not the case, however, for Catherine Howard or for the Lady Rochford. So by the January of 1542, Catherine and Lady Rochford were indicted with treason. They weren't given a trial, and the reason they could be accused of treason is they're indicted under an act of attainder. So basically, they made up a new law to incriminate them. So you can't just be executed for adultery. That's not, while adultery is a crime, it's not treason. So, and she hadn't in any way, like they said with Anne Boleyn, she hadn't in any way attempted to harm the king's life or planned to harm the king's life. So they made a new law to say that it was illegal to not reveal to the king or the monarch if you've had previous relationships. So That wasn't a law at the time when it happened. They've made it a law now, and in hindsight, Catherine is guilty of treason because of this. So for not revealing what happened with Manox and Derham before marrying the king, even though it wasn't a crime when she did it. When Catherine is told of this, she asks that her family not be blamed for any of her errors, and she asks that her clothes be distributed among her servants. And I think both those two things really contrast with the kind of silly, childish, vain, selfish depiction we often get of Catherine in film and TV. On the 10th of February 1542, at 9 a.m, both Catherine Howard and Lady Rochford were executed by beheading. Now, while the phrase often gets passed around that she died, but she would rather have died the wife of a Culpeper, that's not true. We don't really know what her last words were. Sadly, she wasn't considered important enough to really record that. But bearing in mind what she'd been through because of Culpeper, she'd actually ended things in September anyway, at possibly great expense to herself. That doesn't seem like the sort of thing she would be saying to me anyway. So that's Catherine Howard. An apology, the end part was a bit rushed there, but we are coming up to time on a long video. So I won't keep you too much longer, but as always, please do let me know what your favourite on-screen portrayal of Catherine Howard is. I don't really have much to go on here, as you know. I'm not very good at watching TV. I didn't love the Tudor one. I think she's very beautiful. I love some of the dresses they put her in. But again, I don't necessarily love that sort of silly, nasty, vain portrayal. She gets quite a lot. So if you love that one, let me know. If you can think of a better one, or you know of a better one, again, please do let me know. And I hope you are enjoying Gareth Russell's book, if you're reading it, about Catherine Howard. And I'll catch up with you about that on Saturday. And then next week, we'll be looking at Catherine Parr.